of the trend forecasts that we are looking at are saying that about 40% of the future workforce will either be freelancers or remote workers, and that will reduce the number of people actually coming to work every day. I'm not sure whether the 40% are actually correct for Denmark. It will probably only be 20 or 25, but we need to strike a balance between those two. And I found some other funny numbers. I'm a fact finder. A study shows that one face-to-face meeting equals 34 emails. So we can never replace the personal interaction and having people in the same room taking in meetings or having the informal talk around coffee or whatever happens during the non-effective work period as well. And studies also show that performance is increased by 20% if some of the very basic human interactions is part of the workday, and 70% of all office workers are more satisfied with their work if they have a friend at work that they can talk to. So moving all the way over to remote working is probably never going to happen in Denmark, but we need to strike a balance. Another trend I wanted to talk to you guys about is that the office space as such is reducing. Due to urbanization, we have more and more people coming into the bigger cities. We're talking about mega cities. So the number of square footage that each employee has been reduced quite heavily. So how do we solve both remote working, flexibility, the hybrid, and less space? How do we fix that?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of fixing. I just think it's a new way of looking at working. And I think, and there's one thing I just want to touch on what you said before, which I find is probably where we are also misleading ourselves to think that it's all about the coffee and the mingling and sort of the social aspects. It's really also about cross-pollination between different people and ideas sort of springing up through conversation, and therefore again coming back giving to the benefit for whatever company you're working for. So I think the setup of how you want to conduct this and see how we do this, you see a tendency now. There's a lot of, we have one here in Copenhagen called Better Place, which I like to, by the way, to throw in a word for here, is a new way of setting up office where you kind of go in, plug in, you rent by the hour, and you go there and you meet clients or you meet some of your colleagues. So I think there will be a lot more concentration on cutting square meters and therefore also having a lower lease, and then sort of kind of utilizing leftover space in the city that you could share with others. So I think this is where it's all heading, and I see sort of the Airbnb moving in that direction. And if you go to Berlin, London, places like this, you already see there are people out there that are using a lot of the vast vacancies that are standing out here. I think we could work a lot more smarter in utilizing and sharing this way around, and that I think is where a lot of the office trends are going to go. Because whether you go to the local cafe or you go to, let's say, a place that's not been let out yet, and you can just sort of rent it momentarily, I think this is really where there's a potential of also offices going.
That leads back to our very first question, that flexibility and balance is where we're heading. Your perspective on this?
I think generally that core square meterage for the core office is definitely reducing, also because there aren't 100% attendance at work anymore. All the figures are showing that, and as you say, maybe not so heavily here in Denmark, but definitely worldwide. I know from Australia there are many companies where it is 40% of their people working from home, and it's by choice to avoid 2-hour commute times. Gives greater flexibility, but we do have examples here. I heard just yesterday that suddenly Charlotte Station in my area is a co-working space. 10 years ago I never would have thought the station building in Denmark was going to be a co-working space for HR consultants and fashion designers. You get on the train in Copenhagen and the quiet carriage that used to be for kind of strange people, it's totally full because everybody's working. You can't even get a seat in the quiet carriage. It almost should reverse, that it's all quiet and the quiet carriage should be for people that want to make noise. So I think, and also, I mean, everyone that I talk to here is seeing signs of it. I spoke to my hairdresser that said Thursday morning and Friday morning is her busiest times because everybody working from home is coming in, and she's happy because she gets to go home early because she used to have to fit those clients in after 5 o'clock when they went to work. So it's there for sure. I don't think we realize actually how evident it is in Copenhagen, but it's definitely around the world. The need for office space in the city is reducing, and those other ways of procuring real estate, I mean, definitely that whole landlord-tenant relationship is out the window. You now have WeOffice and these huge organizations providing real estate as a service, and of course, just like leasing a car, people are happy to pay a premium because they have flexibility. They can scale up and scale down, so that whilst it might cost a little bit more, they can get out of it, or they can get access to 300 locations around the world without having to set up an office. So definitely going forward, that whole approach to real estate as a service and not as a place that you...
And I guess being part of a co-working setup also means that you have colleagues and you don't have to sit at home and talk to your cat all day, but you have someone to talk to. Your perspective on urbanization and space?
It's fabulous. I mean, you go to Los Angeles and you see buildings like this that have been vacant. They're loaded with people. The utilization of all these materials that were waste are now being used. Every coffee shop is packed. It's people's offices, and there's WeWork and other places, but it's exciting because people are gathering together, they're doing things together, and they're utilizing materials in a smart way, and I think that is what I like best about it.
We've seen restaurants as well who have provided the service because they open up their menu and they serve food from 5 p.m. in the afternoon, so they have the entire day free. The space is just vacant, and they've been converted into hourly rated, sit down, have your lunch, work, and you pay per hour. And then at 5 o'clock the workers are asked to leave, and then it turns into a real restaurant. So it's just a matter of, again, flexibility and the urbanization more condensed and utilizing the space that we already have.
I think there's sort of a clash between what we really, in the beginning you said, do you sort of practice what you preach? And I think with an environment where we're working faster and more speedy, and when do we actually also turn off the knob that's called work, and we have the life balance sort of coming into place. And I think that, of course, is where it's a sliding sort of mechanism, where I think it will also be a matter of how do you sort of work this out on a daily basis. But I think, again, from the example you gave here before, we're actually already there. I think that's how we work nowadays. And I think it's really about creating environments and ways of doing this and conducting this where you feel more comfortable, and therefore I think you can also bring down the stress factor. So I think the static idea of the open, fixed office is dead per se. However, there are cultures that are so heavily embedded when you go through Europe, especially in the Nordic region. I mean, it's entirely different. The example you gave with going out for lunching in Stockholm or Sweden, everybody does this every day. In Denmark, an office, there you have a cantina, it's much more like a gated community. So I think there's also sort of different, very old and ways of thinking our offices that will take its different course. But of course, in an environment where we work across borders and so forth, I think there's a big influx on each other, because we of course take in what we see. So I think there's a move, but it's going to happen differently.
But there's huge nationality differences here. Where in Denmark we are fairly good at keeping the work-life balance, whereas in the US I guess it's more as a sliding open door where there's no difference between work and being off work. I have some interesting facts again. In France, just recently, as per January 1st this year, by law, companies have to write down a policy on each employee's right to disconnect. They have to have a policy in the company about how employees are able to disconnect. And in Germany, some of the bigger production companies are now shutting down the server at 6 o'clock in the evening so that people cannot send emails. What happens at 6 o'clock in the morning is that when they turn it back on, is that you've done emails all night, and at 6 o'clock it just says where, and you have 100 emails in your inbox. But the idea is that they're shutting down. So that's sort of the reverse reaction that we're also seeing. Your perspective on work-life balance?
I think I really hope that the Nordic countries, Denmark as a leader, can actually go out to the world and actually show that actually there needs to be a balance. You were discussing actually work-life integration, that it's totally integrated today. And when you can see the statistics with stress in the workforce and people burning out, especially in those factories in the States, we can't keep going on at this pace. We can't keep just being bombarded with information, and in our industry, deadlines get shorter and shorter and shorter. I mean, I cherish the days where you used to go to a meeting, you would send out minutes of the meeting, you would put your drawings in an envelope and send them away, and you could think about what you were going to do for the next week. it's just crazy what's happened in the last 2 decades, really. So I think I would love Denmark to be a leader in actually showing that if we don't get that balance, there will be such a negative impact on innovation, on productivity, on people's enjoyment with even turning up in the office, that it really can be a pioneer, I think.
Your perspective, Bert?
I think the work and stress is associated to when you love your work, it's just not stressful. And we strive to find those people that really care. And yes, there's a lot to do, but it's fun. It's interesting. It's what we look for. It's interesting because in Silicon Valley, I was there last week, and we have a tremendous amount of clients there. And I think we do because they care about the people that work there, and they're trying to bring in product that these younger kids feel good about. And so I think they're really desperately trying to do it, because when you see these structures, it's kind of scary. I mean, they're huge.
But there is a clear difference in sort of just the average work hours, just for your information. The average work hours in Denmark is 37, and yours is 46. So there's a huge difference just in the very basic premise of having a job. Any more questions from the audience? No, you're all done. No questions, no worries. You're all set for the future of the workspace and your own job. Yes, thank you. You're free to come up and talk to these guys afterwards, but have a lovely afternoon.